Hello everybody, welcome back to another episode of FoxyBoxes Map Making with Sparks. Today's a bit more of a recap episode than normal because I kind of suddenly realised it was Friday. So today we are doing some texturing. I've kind of sped up, I've recorded the entire process. So we're working on this sort of desert stone texture. You could see that I was drawing it in Photoshop by using the smear, the smudge tool, and kind of copying it across. And then I try and create the top of the block. I sort of use the pixelate function to try and create sort of a reddish sand. Play with the levels a little bit. So the idea here is to start making some texture pack blocks for our desertier levels. So the first thing is I create the top and the bottom of the blocks, and then I decide to expand this test area out a little bit so I can get a bit of a feel for what it'll look like. In the end, not quite happy with the stripy block, with the desert stone block you saw. I then tried to create some variations for the block. So this is sort of a slightly warped stone to create a bit of variation, and this is the point where I try and work out how to do variants on the blocks. Turns out that you don't edit the model file for the sandstone. You create a new model for each variant, and you edit the model file, the block data file, the metadata file, instead of the separate one. So I kind of play around with that for a little bit of a while, trying to find an example somewhere, and all sorts of different combinations. But in the end, it's the block states. That's what it's called. The block state folder is where you create your variants. I then create a second variant with this sort of a slightly more raised ripple, and then I try and create a second version of it with a sort of a bit of a crack in it, which is great. And so yeah, this is going to be more of a just sit and watch episode. I really ran out of time this week, so I just wanted to show you that I'm still working on things. Finally get the variants working at this point. You can see there's sort of cracks here and there, a bit of warping shape and changes and things, and I think it looks pretty good. Like I said, I think the stripes need a bit of work. I may slightly redo those. I then decided to change the floor because it was too sandy. So I create this pixel effect and I use a smudge, a motion blur tool, to create sort of a streaked, very softly streaked stone, and set that to be the top of the block. But I only set it to for one variant first, which is why you get this patchy effect. So I then need to... I also noticed that there was a break across the texture. So what I'm doing here is I'm moving the top to the bottom and the bottom to the top, which puts the break in the middle of the texture, and then I am using the smudge tool to soften the edge so that we get a much more a smooth tiling texture. So that's pretty good. Next, I add some sort of little spots, which is supposed to be sort of variations to this texture, so that there's a bit of a difference to the things on the floor. Again, not sure how it looks, but you can see all of the different variants now have. By the way, the variants are randomly selected based on the coordinates they are placed in the world, so they will be in the same place for every viewer of the map. So the cracks will always be in the same place, kind of thing. And then I just add one more variant. I then go back into my textures and decide that instead of smudging them, I'm going to use the warp tool. So I create this sort of bloated warp where the bottom goes down and the top goes up to create sort of a bit of a variation in the texture. And then I use the wave tool to create a bit more of a nicer ripple. In fact, I don't use the wave, but I do use ripple. I think I use ripple. Yeah. So you can see it's sort of slightly different wavy texture. Just to add some variation to the walls, really, because I think it's going to improve how it looks. And I tidied it up a little bit with the smudge tool where it broke it, and we get sort of a smoother design to things now, which is kind of nice. So next I decided that I was going to use the oak fences as a sort of miniature block to create some more detail to the walls. So what I'm doing here is I'm importing the oak fence model when it is placed, when two are placed next to each other. I'm opening the fence side base model, and I am editing it so that it takes up more space. So you can see this here. I'm stretching the top of the model down, and then deleting the bottom element. And then I kind of play around with that a little bit. The idea being that I have these sort of miniature versions of this material. So you can see that the modelling needs a bit more work. I realise I need to lower it some further, and then the next step will be to actually texture it, which is this bit here. There we go. Now you'll notice that the posts are in the wrong place. I also slightly thickened the model, and I use UV mapping to correctly spread the texture across the blocks. It's looking pretty good. So next I make it a little bit wider so that it feels thicker. I think I'll do that one more time. And then I work out how to get rid of the posts. If you're wondering, sort of want to look at these model files in more detail, I have updated the GitHub repository for all of these models and textures. So if you look in the video description, there is a link there to that, and you can have a look at the model files if you want to see exactly how it works. What I was doing just then was trying to make the model wider in one direction than the other, because I hoped it would fill it, but it looks like it kind of creates this sort of zigzag pattern like you can see right there, so it doesn't really work like that, unfortunately. I haven't worked out how to cover the top of the fence model, which you will probably see in a moment. I haven't worked out how to do that yet as of recording, and then I sort of try and work out how to create a exception for the oak fence post, so that if it's a standalone, then it still displays as a fence. So you can see I'm doing a when north false, south false, east false, west false, so that it does appear if it isn't touching any other fences. But otherwise it hides it, so you don't get the little fence models we saw earlier in the corners of the block. I slightly expand the model there so that it fully takes up the block space. Realise that there's no texture on the underside of these blocks yet, still isn't. I guess I can make some sort of rocky underside texture for that. Then I open the fence post base model. First I tried to open the oak fence model and then realised that that's a child of the actual fence post model. So I opened that one up instead and retexture it to look like our stone. There we go. Then attempt to add the flat sandstone floor model to the tops of the fence textures. And fail miserably. And then notice that there's sort of a gap in the model of the fence side when they're placed like that, so I go back into that model and I add an extra face in there, so you can see it's sort of hollow there. So I create a new face and I also apply the smooth texture to the top of this model as well, so that it looks right. So thank you very much for watching. Sorry it's a bit of a shorter episode than normal. I ran out of time this week. The week just flew by. I will hopefully have more for you in the next episode. We've got some cool things left to do. So yeah, thanks for watching. Have a good weekend, and I'll see you next Friday.